Well, the top of the morning to you, and welcome to It's a Good Life. Today we have a very special guest on one of your favorite topics. We're going to talk about money. And we brought in a gentleman by the name of Brian Preston. Brian's the host of the Money Guy Show and is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Millionaire Mission, which we'll be diving into today. It's always a topic we get probably more requests for than anything else, and especially right now with high inflation and all the challenges that people dealing with. So we're talking about how to save it, how to spend it, how to invest it. And what I really love about Brian, just like the working by referral system, he's developed a 9-step system to building wealth called the Financial Order of Operations. So Brian is a recovering CPA. I'm a recovering accountant. So we are going to nerd out here today, and you guys get to listen in. And really looking forward to talking a little money and a little systems here. Brian Preston, welcome to the show. Thanks for making time for us.
Brian, thanks so much for having me on. And I think you just nailed it. I mean, I think the public is so hungry for this information because it's the chicken or the egg. They're often wondering, hey, is your system great because you sold a lot of it, or is it great because it actually created fruits from the system? And I always like to tell everybody on the intro, this system, I know it because it worked for me. It's worked for my clients, and it's definitely the chicken came before the egg, and the system does create fruit.
Well, we're big into, there's an awful lot of people with books out, right? I mean, I don't know what the number was last year, how many billions of books are out there. And there's a lot of people, they're on The Apprentice on Tuesday, and they're writing their autobiography on Friday. In fact, I was trying to think, a young man here from San Diego, he won a silver medal. He's a skateboarder. Yeah. And he won the medal on a Monday, and he came home to San Diego, and we had a little reception for him at the golf club. And he announced that his autobiography was coming out.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm like at 22, dude, I mean, what are we talking about here, And so the fact that you've been there, done that, practitioner, brought people through it, and out of the practitioner, that's when you got into more of the media and more of the podcasts and more of the, hey, maybe this might work for more people, which is exactly what happened for me. And the dynamic that I love is a system. A system means that it's a set of disciplines, a set of routines, things you can set on automatic that can actually take you somewhere that you can't take yourself. And I'm really looking forward to diving into that. I also love the role that mentors and influencers and other people play in our lives. And I came across in a lot of your work this Mr. Morrow. Yeah. And I'd love you to kind of give us a little insight in Mr. Morrow, and what did Mr. Morrow teach you?
Well, it's one of those things. I grew up in a household where my parents, great parents, lots of love, even very disciplined parents, meaning my parents didn't waste money. Mm-hmm. They just didn't know how to make their money actually work for them. Yeah. And I dealt with some scarcity with my father losing his job and all kind of other things. And nobody ever told me how money worked. But I can never forget my junior year of high school. And by the way, Mr. Morrow, just to set the table for everybody, Vietnam veteran, served his time in the Army, and then he's now helping us. He's also helping with the wrestling team at our high school. And I'm not so sure that he came in to inspire more than he came in to share his regrets of what he wished he'd have known if he was sitting in a high school class back when I was there, 16, 17 years of age. And Mr. Morrow came into class. He goes, guys, I'm so jealous of every one of you, because every one of you, if you'll start investing or starting putting $100 a month to work, you'll be a millionaire by the time you retire. And here I am, not coming from money, and I'm working the local fast food. I worked at Hardee's at the time at the drive-through, and I was like, dude, I don't make that much money, but I think I could save $100 a month. And what really Mr. Morrow was talking about was compounding growth. I mean, once I realized, and that's really. Millionaire Mission was written because when I graduated from college, got into public accounting, everybody, when they find out that you're a public accountant or a CPA, they think you're brilliant with money. But I was good with balance sheets, income statements, and that type of stuff because I'd been taught that. But I didn't know what to do with my money. Nobody, the margin, once you live on less than you make. So I was like, I want to write a book that will actually help the future Brians or the people who come out who want to actually already have this mindset of discipline. What do you do with that next dollar so you don't get sidetracked for 2 or 3 years, or somebody sells you some junk that actually derails you That was the goal. It was that simple. And by the way, you don't write a book to get rich. That's the other thing.
No.
Sometimes you see comments where people say, I bet he's building his money off of this book. And I'm like, oh, you just do not know how publishing works. This is definitely a labor of love.
Yeah. By the way, where was that Hardee's? Where did you grow up? What town were you in?
McDonough, Georgia. So Atlanta I lived in South Atlanta.
Yeah.
It's still a community that kind of struggles sometimes with, it's more of a blue collar community, but I loved it. I mean, I thought it was great. And this is a sidebar. I love the age I am because you didn't realize you were poor back then.
Right.
We didn't have social media and all the other stuff. Everybody else was poor, so you just didn't know any better.
Yep. Same as in the south side of Dublin. Everybody was the same way, and it was good stuff. My wife's from Georgia, and her family's from there, so I'm out there a lot. I thought I heard that little twang when you said Hardee's. I go, he's a Southern boy right there. And so that is the truth. And the truth is, I grew up the son of a house painter. You grew up with a dad who lost his job in southern Georgia, and being a millionaire is a state of mind. It requires some disciplines. And if you have a system, you cut through the crap and you stay on track. It also keeps you off the distraction road. One of the things we have right now is high inflation. Yep. Expenses go up. People are tight. What are the trends we see right now? More people gambling at a rate of 2 to 1 than ever before.
Online sports gambling especially.
And it made it easy, right? And it's like, why? Because I don't feel like that $100 is going to do anything for me. Mm-hmm. But if I put $100 on, Sloppy Joe in the fifth in the Preakness, maybe I got a chance. So we see the online gambling, we see the actual casinos, we see gambling up a ton, we see investing down a ton, and the overall sense of hopelessness that, hey, people say my 22% inflation since 2019, my $100 is now worth 78. Now, and we'll get down the path, that assets are ultimately the greatest hedge against it all. But maybe we could address for a second just that sense of hopelessness. Like, what's $100 going to do for me? What's $200 going to do for me? It's kind of like the person who's overweight, and one more piece of pizza is not going to hurt me. So let's talk about that piece of pizza, that $100, and what the difference actually is.
Well, here's something I always remind young people is that I always talk about the 3 ingredients to wealth, because you, of course, have discipline, which is living on less than you make. If you do that, you create margin, which does yield the money, which the money is an important part. But the third is the most valuable and important ingredient, and that's time. And people in their 20s are literally billionaires when it comes to how many seconds and minutes they have of time. I'll tell you, as a person in their 50s now, I'm jealous of everybody in their 20s and even 30s because you just have so much opportunity that somebody has just not opened the curtain to let you see how valuable that component of time is in your life. And by the way, that $100 is more valuable than you realize. We have, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we have what's called a wealth multiplier. And I even have a koozie. It's out of arm's reach right now, but every dollar for a 20-year-old has the potential to become $88 at retirement. For a 30-year-old, every dollar has the potential to become $23. For a 40-year-old, it's $7, and for a 50-year-old, it's $3. Do you see what time can do for you? It gives you literally exponential multiplication of what every dollar can become. So don't get caught up in a dollar is not going to do much, because when I look at my clients, we have a $1.4 billion wealth management firm. People are shocked when they realize that their total account values at retirement, typically 90+% is the growth, not the contribution. It's the money growing upon itself. I look back on my own life. I can't tell you which of the original investments is now this huge nest egg, but I think those small little decisions all added upon each other
for sure
and really lead to this money. You look back and go, how in the heck did it get to this level? And it's all those small decisions.
Well, I knew I had to interview you. There's a quote I've been quoting for 30 years on stage, 34 years, and I saw it in your book, and I went, this guy might be the real deal here. Our friend Albert Einstein, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. And we're in a spot right now where a lot of people are paying it, right? The average rate on a new credit card issued today is 25.8%. 9.62%. When, we know the rule of 72, we understand those principles. Somebody's debt is doubling every 4 years. It's just like if I could get my 25% rate of return, Warren Buffett can't get 25% return. And so we've got to get people in that path. Here's what would be great if you're up for it. I'd love to kind of go over the 9 principles.
Sure.
And then maybe we could dive into a couple of them deep and give people the sense of where they're going. If they want it all and whatever else, go get the book and go listen to it, go read it, all that kind of good stuff. But if we could do a quick fly over the 9 steps, why don't we do that?
I'll rip and give you all 9 really quick. And by the way, even if you don't buy the book, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we have a download of the 9 resources. So that way, if you're driving down the road or however you're consuming this, you don't feel like you have to grab a pen and pencil.
Yeah.
Step 1. Cash, by the way, is the resource. I know it's unsexy and people don't like having cash, but this is going to be your margin that protects you from the chaos of life. And cash is so important because it keeps you from making desperate decisions. So it's so important that it's 2 steps in my system. And let me start with step 1, which is highest deductible covered. When I say highest deductible covered, we're talking about your auto insurance, your car insurance, your homeowner's insurance, your renter's insurance, your medical insurance. Figure out what the highest one is. Cover that first, because that's going to keep you from the desperate decisions of an accident or something that derails you, causes bankruptcy or some other problem. Step 2. Get that free money from your employer. If you work for a company and they're offering you 50 to 100% guaranteed rate of return by just putting $1 into the 401k, do it. Look, you're spot on, Brian. 25% for interest is ridiculous, but even 50 to 100% guaranteed is better than that 25. So that's why it's step 2, which breaks the rules for a lot of other systems. But I'll tell you, when you look at the first account for traditional investors, it's typically their 401k with their employer that crosses into 7 figures.
And we do 100% match for our employees, and I have to sell them on it. I have to work hard. Now we've done it so for the last few years now. We actually got an award from Vanguard because we have the highest participation rate of any company in the country, because I've been banging this drum for so long. And here's what I found. So people say, why do you work so hard to give your money away? When my own staff are economically sound, they're more sound at home, they're more sound at work, and they're certainly more sound when they're giving people advice and coaching people up. And so, Ben Franklin, you say 'tis hard for an empty purse to stand upright. Yeah. So I'll say this from the employer side, I want everyone who's working for me to take advantage of the free money because it makes them better and makes them whole. And for I was shocked when I saw that was your number 2, and I think it's brilliant. But I was like, I've never seen anybody have a list where they were talking about the employer match, and I think you're bang on.
Well, but that does lead to, because you were spot on the next point too, is step 3 is the high interest debt. You got to conquer that. If you're paying 25%, that's 2.5 times what you're hoping you make out of your S&P 500 investment. Right. So you've got to pay it off. High interest debt can be credit cards, it can be personal loans, it can even be car loans, even student loan debt, unfortunately, in this crazy world we're in now. And then back to cash. Step 4 is now let's go beyond highest deductible and actually do 3 to 6 months of cash reserves. Now, if you're retired, I want that number to even spike up to 18 months or beyond because you're living off this money now. Step 5, let's take advantage of any accounts that the government's going to restrict who can put it in and how much you can put it in, meaning it's tax favored. And that's where your Roth IRAs, your health savings accounts, there's a reason the government's restricting all that tax-free growth opportunity, is that they want you to take advantage of it, but they don't want you to get too much of it. So you better start young and often to really take advantage of that. Step 6, we often tell people, look, I know it's aspirational in the beginning. Step 6 is max out those retirement accounts. I want you to get to 25% savings rate. And I know that in your 20s, that seems like crazy, but that's why it's okay. It doesn't have to be in your 20s, 25%, but it should be aspirational that you get something to work because what you're trying to do is build up your financial foundation so that you can own stuff. Back to our earlier conversation on how, if you're a young person, do you get ahead of this? Own assets. I'm talking about investments, I'm talking about real estate. The sooner you own things, the better you're going to be protected from the chaos of the world. That leads to step 7. What do you do? Hyperaccumulation. What do you do once you're saving 25% or beyond? This is when we talk about not just tax-favored savings and investments, but how are you actually going to use this money? Because that you got to think about. If you think you're leaving the workforce at 55, 60 years of age, your account structure is going to be different than somebody who's working into 70. So use the step 7 to really kind of take ownership of what you're going to do with that money. Step 8, this is when it gets really exciting. The boring title on this is prepaid future expenses. The fun title is abundance goals, is because this is when you're finally going to now help the kids with college. This is when I love loading up on real estate and other things that the government wants you to have once you have a financial foundation underneath you. This is also when you can let your lifestyle kick it up a notch because you're not faking it anymore. You actually can afford, if you want to have nicer lifestyle decisions like a nicer car, a nicer house, or whatever that is. And then step 9, let's finally pay off the low interest debt. And I have all kind of rules on this. I get frustrated when I see 33-year-olds try to pay off a 2.5% or 3% mortgage. So in the book, I lay out 3 key charts both on earning potential, happiness of life, as well as the resources of time and money. And I kind of show you that while we think once you get in your late 40s, early 50s, you're going to be in this keep wealth phase, this maintain of wealth. And it's okay to start thinking about de-risking because it's not about maximizing every dollar. But if you're somebody in your 20s and 30s and you're so fortunate that you already own a house, don't get in a hurry paying off those low interest debts because you haven't made wealth yet. And that's a big mistake I see is people are squandering that valuable resource of time.
Right. Well, it's one of the things, and I've told you, I'm good friends with Dave Ramsey, and we've knocked it about a little bit. And, I had a house paid off and so on and so forth, but when the rates hit 2%, I took out a couple of $1 million loan at 2%, I bought treasury bills at 5.25%, which I'm in the People's Republic of California, so they also don't have to pay 13% tax to the state of California. And I went, why in the world would I not do that? I have a fixed rate on the debt. I have a fixed rate on the income. It's state income tax free. Why in the world would I not do that? And that's where, being smart about debt. And that's why it's interesting to see, you talking about that. And some people will argue back, you got to get all your debts paid off before you invest. I like the idea of what you talk about to kind of get in the game because, people will celebrate I'm debt free. And I go, well, you came into this world debt free. Like you got back to the same level you are as a child.
Right.
You want to get the ridiculous debt. I mean, if you're paying 25% on a card, you got to get that sucker done. You got to get it over with because you'll never make that rate of return. But I also believe like getting your money in the market, getting your money into assets, whether it be real estate, stocks, it gives you a chance to grow. And anybody who did that the last 6 years has certainly seen that growth, and it's outpaced the cash and it's outpaced any kind of lower debt they have. What is your best advice for people as they go through this? It's like to me, there's a couple of mental crossing the road, right? There's the road not traveled. And one is I have debt, but I want to invest. And the other is I want to really invest, but I don't want to be, live the miser life, and you talk about this, you talk about that different mindset. So kind of master versus miser you talk about in your book. Those two crossroads I think are hard for people. Like Warren Buffett, his show came out like being Warren Buffett, and he admits to the fact he was so focused on building assets and growing wealth and so on and so forth. And here was his wife who wanted to she wanted to be a huge philanthropist and so on and so forth. And by the time he got around to it, and he says, no, the numbers are going to be here, right? And he's probably a little on the spectrum, right? He's got his numbers and this and the other. And his wife dies, and she never gets to do the thing they really wanted to do. So to me, in his case, he chose the asset over the lifestyle. Obviously, most people choose the lifestyle over the asset. Talk about that thinking. You're at the road less traveled, and what's your opinion on that?
Brian, you are hitting on, and I can tell you possess this skill as well, is I think what my superpower is that I'm a nerd. I love math. I love numbers. But I also have this crazy sentimental side where I look at life and I try to figure out how things work, and I try to figure out how you maximize the two sides. It's not just how do you get the most money, but it's also so you look back at your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, you go, well done. or your 50, 60-year-old self is crying those sloppy tears because it's so thankful for what you did in your 20s, but also because you're so happy of all those memories of the trips, the way you lived your best life.
Yeah.
And I do that for my young associates as well, as I'm constantly saying, look, that's what the system and the rule is designed to do, is to give you the freedom. Because I find financial mutants, that's what I call the people who kind of follow our system, they have a hard time of letting go because they're such achievers. They're just hard pounding to go to the next. And that's why I want you to understand 25%, the value of letting go. You can go beyond if you have specific goals like you're retiring at 45 or 50, or you want to go into a new business venture that you're going to need more resources that require you saving beyond 25%. But for a lot of you, I want people to feel it's okay to maximize life, both from a memories, from a decade standpoint. And it's not all what the consumer world, all the advertisers are putting out, because that's what cracks me up is when they show the fancy cars with 20 and 30-year-olds driving. And what I remember, and my favorite memories about being in my 20s and 30s, is how you can tolerate anything, meaning you can travel the world, stay in not the nicest facilities, but still get 90% of the experience by going on the tours, seeing all the beautiful things that we have in this awesome world we live, and do it on a cheap. Because when you get my age, your 50s, you are going to be bougie, and you're going to require the nicer hotels and stuff. So maximize each of those phases and don't get caught up in the traps that the advertising agencies and the world is trying to put before you.
Right. It's different seasons of life, right? And I would say the first crossing roads I came to, the first time I came, and again, I went to college. I studied to be an accountant. I got into business, and sure enough, I'm spending more than I'm making, right? Not the only accountant or financial planner to ever do that. And my mentor, Jim Rohn, he said, hey, you got to have the 70-10-10-10 program. Well, I went home that night, and over the course of the weekend, my bride and I were just newly married, and we weren't on the 70-10-10 program. We were living on 106% of what I made.
Wow.
And we had to make the tough decisions and so on and so forth. And I know this is in your book. The very first and probably the greatest financial decision that we made that's led to hundreds of millions of dollars since then was we cut out expenses. Some of them were a little awkward. I stopped being a member at the local little golf club because I do a lot of business there. And I'm like, guys, I can't afford to play. And I had to make the cuts.
Sure.
And we got our expenses down. And then we did this. We committed to $50 automatically put into our savings every 2 weeks. And all that ever happened over the course of the last 35 years of our marriage is that number changed. We have the same automatic. It goes from our check into our savings every 2 weeks. And all that's happened is different zeros. And then learning, and what your book does a good job of where to put the zeros, right? Because just in the bank's no good. But that $50 every 2 weeks is the reason, we've built an economic fortress. And it started with that, and I know you talk about it because it's automatic. I didn't have to think about it. And I made it more automatic than at the time, and people were, when I would talk about this, I said, I'm still going to write the check for my mortgage, but I'm going to make my savings automatic. Most people will make their house payment automatic.
Right.
And not the savings. And I said, I want the savings to be the highest priority we have. I'd rather lose the house than the savings. And that was kind of the line in the sand. And my bride wasn't having that. Like, hey, what do we got to do? So, and I know you're a big fan of that. Talk a little bit about making things automatic, because people think you have to be super disciplined. I feel like if you have the systems in place, you don't have to be the most regimented person in the world, but your money has to be regimented.
No, that's why it can start with small numbers, but I do like the automatic process because, and I talk about a concept in the book called forced scarcity, meaning that every time I've gotten, because it starts small. I remember my first investments were around $200, but then forced scarcity would have every time you get a pay raise, maybe you take 60% to increase the savings, but only 40% goes towards lifestyle. Whereas I feel like most, especially here in America, people, they what I get sad about is people who will read a book like mine or watch your content, Brian, go on fire that they're going to do this, but then you fast forward 10 years, they're still doing the exact same amount that they were doing when they first got on fire or excited. No, this needs to evolve, hence forced scarcity. Is it's okay to keep challenging yourself as long as you're keeping yourself honest also. Are we maximizing this decade we're in? And that's the beauty of my system, is that because it lets you be free to know that you are increasing, but also to live your best life. But it's constantly raising what is the next bar in that automatic, inevitable wealth building machine.
And it's so hard, right? Because you're under attack every hour of every day. I mean, there's a reason they pay all that money to these advertising agencies, and you're driving along and you see the nice car and you see this, and you know I really feel like to win financially, you really have to be countercultural. You really can't be caught up in the emperor's new clothes. You know, I never forget it. So my son, he was just turned a senior in high school, and we were shopping for a car. And I had told them all, I'll get you all your first car. They all worked. All my kids, 100% of their money, though. So they were on like the 70, 10, 10, but 70% went into their IRA from the time they were 10 years old, which is why my kids are on the glide slope to all be millionaires in their own right.
Right.
Because they started investing at 10 years of age. And now they're in their 20s and 30s, and they're all they've done is contribute more, and those things have compounded many times over. So we're there, and I remember buying my son Alex this Jeep. And I'm at the dealership, and we've done our homework. He wants this, he looked around. We found this one place. I'm negotiating back and forth with this guy. And this guy looks me in the eye, and he goes, I said, so how do you want to do this? And I said, great, well, we'll just write a check. And he looks at me, and he goes, oh, man, that's a bad use of money. He says, you should have your money in the market. Now, there's a part of that I know is true, but he's like, you should have your money in the market. He goes, the interest rates are so low right now, you'd be crazy not to, so on and so forth. And I'm sitting there, starting to sweat, and I'm going, geez, maybe he's right, maybe he's right, maybe he's right. And then he sits down and he crosses his legs. And as he crosses his legs, I notice he has a hole in his shoe. And I think, I'm taking financial advice from a guy with a hole in his shoe. And I said to him, let me ask you a question. Have you been able to ever be able to pay cash for a car? No. I said, would it be a dream of yours to pay cash for one of your kids' car one day? He goes, oh, I'd love that. I said, you know what? Maybe one day you can do that, because that's what I'm about to do. And so the point is, I was about to take financial advice from a dude with a hole in his shoe, not because he was thrifty, but because he's spending everything he makes. I had done the opposite. I'd had the house with many rooms and no furniture. I had driven the older car till it was, okay, I'm fixing this thing every 2 weeks. I got to get rid of it. My wife and I didn't go on the expensive vacations. We went on the long weekends, and we did all these things. We made all these sacrifices, live within our means, put our money to work. And one of the assets we want to do is have all our kids grow up and have an opportunity to be debt-free when they started their journey. Everybody has an idea and everybody has an opinion, and you're going to feel like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's why it's great to have the book. It's great to have the outside source. You're on the right track. We both love The Millionaire Next Door. That great stuff. Oh, man, those guys were right. The Richest Man in Babylon is where I started, right? That was my first one. But this right here I think is good because you go, I'm not crazy. And the same people that are maybe betting on the football games or down at the track or at the casino are the same people who'll give you advice. They're the same people who'll brag about the car they owe a bunch of money on, and you have the older car that has no debt on it. And so it is hard, right? Because we live in this Madison Avenue world of the emperor's new clothes, and you got to be the person who goes, I'm not keeping up with the Joneses. I'm going to keep up with the Prestons. I'm going to keep up with the Buffinis, and not keep up with the Joneses.
I think Brian, it's so interesting. YouGov did a survey on the American public asking what percentage of Americans make over $500,000. And we all know, because we're nerdy accountant types, is that number is less than 1%. But the public thought it was greater than 20+%.
Right.
And I think there is a world out there right now being put upon you with social media and other things that are trying to make you feel insecure about where you are, so that you will spend more than you have. Some of the things that Brian had laid out. What I would encourage you, and I'm going to just be transparent with you, is that we have this concept, or we talk about this topic all the time. It's called the messy middle. Because I think life just naturally in your 30s gets tough when if you get married, you have children, you have your job responsibilities, you're going to be short on time, you're going to be short on money. And even though my system, and I'm sure the things that, you hear on Brian's share, we're going to get you through that, but it doesn't mean it's easy. I mean, I will tell you, even though I have wealth beyond what I ever could have imagined, I didn't truly feel comfortable, meaning outside of that messy middle, until my early 40s, because I was so ingrained in that, and I was still enjoying life. Don't mishear me. I was making memories, making sure that I enjoyed my 20s and 30s, but I was also so ingrained with making sure that I was laying the groundwork to not have regrets, even if it didn't feel comfortable. And I think so much is out there being told you can have your best life right now if you can finance it $200 a month for 84 months. No, don't fall into those consumption traps. That is fool's gold. It's a bridge to nowhere.
No.
There's a smart way to use debt, but just don't let somebody sell you a bad bill of goods. Or as Brian just said, don't let somebody with a hole in their shoe sell you this.
Well, last Saturday, I had dinner with a good friend of mine who's a billionaire. And he's 76 years of age. And I said to him, now he's been successful for a long, long time. I know him 30 years. I said, when did you feel like, I don't have to worry about it anymore? He said, about 5 years ago. I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, dude, really? And he goes, about 5 years ago. Now, he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So the truth of the matter is, Rockefeller, they asked him, what does it take for a man to be truly happy? How much? And he goes, a little bit more than he has. There is no sense of, like, even for myself. I mean, I've done well in life. But, you always have to pay attention to it. You always got to keep your eye on it, You always got to go and adjust. Inflation, there's two Brians on the phone that have done pretty good here today, and we both have to watch the money. We're both affected by inflation. So
Sure.
I don't want people to feel discouraged by it, but I will say this. If you get yourself on a system like this, and you chip away and you chip away and you chip away and you chip away over time, and by the way, we're all living longer, and we're going to need more money than we think. Over time, you are going to win. And I think being messy in the middle is great stuff. I've got a few little questions I want to ask you at the end of our time here, Brian.
Sure.
But if you were to give one last piece of advice to people, say, hey, if I just had 2 minutes with somebody and I want to really encourage them how they can be on the mission to be a millionaire, what would your final word on that be?
I would ask them I want you right now on pen and paper, write down what your best life would look like. I mean, literally, tell me the why, tell me what you envision. I think you might find it's simpler than, it's not all the glossy, it's not all the glamorous stuff. It's probably what makes you happy. And then I want you to do more of that. And then I want you also to just do a little bit. What decision are you going to make today that will yield exponential benefits? Because you don't have to eat the elephant in one big bite. I'm telling you, this thing is going to be a bunch of small nibbles to create your great, big, beautiful tomorrow. So, and that's what goes back to, I'd send them to moneyguy.com/resources to look at that wealth multiplier, because that's the biggest shock and awe I see is when people realize every dollar has so much potential. And once you understand that, you'll spend differently, you'll think about what it is, and you'll feel better about where you are in life. Because for a 20-something, you're going to be like, holy cow, how could I not win? It's kind of hard not to accomplish this. Those are the two things. Figure out your why, and then right from get-go, figure out what that dollar is worth so you'll look at your spending and saving differently.
And having a system like that's laid out in the Millionaire Mission is a good way to go. And I love the fact you got 9 steps there. Brian, we have 5 questions we ask everybody on the guests, from movie stars to sports figures, whoever we've had. So here's the first one. What's the single best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Mr. Morrow, $100 a month. I mean, that's the reason it starts off my book, because he changed my life with that simple guidance.
Well, and you've taken that concept now to thousands and thousands of people, so good job to you. What one talent or gift do you wish you possessed that you currently don't?
One talent, man, that's a hard one. I wish I was more athletic. I always get jealous of the people like Justin Timberlake who seem like that. You find out they're a scratch golfer. They can dance, they can sing, they're good looking. You're like, man, the good Lord, when he had the salt shaker of talents, obviously got distracted on that person. So I wish that I was, had a little more of that rhythm or maybe talent to be athletic.
Nice. What book has been most instrumental in your life?
I'm going to break your rules and give you 2 because they're the ones that really set me up in the beginning. And you said with one of them already, Millionaire Next Door, and then The Wealthy Barber, both came out in the mid-'90s. And those 2 books set my mind on fire, and that's what I was trying to reproduce for this generation when I wrote this book.
Great. And I think like yours is a continuation of The Millionaire Next Door, which is, here's the system these guys would have used. You know what I mean? Because we're all about the system here, and so I feel like it's like that was a lot of good examples, and here's the mindset, and here's you're not alone. You're not listening to the guy with the hole in the shoes, but you then go, okay, now that you want to be the millionaire next door, here's how to go do it, and that's what I really appreciate about your book. What one movie do you watch over and over again? You're scrolling through the channels, it comes on, and every time you scroll, you'll always kind of stop, even to take in a bit of it.
I don't think this is obscure, but I tell people because it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. The Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, love it.
I mean, that one is, it's pretty incredible, and it's entertaining. I've seen it probably 6 times now.
Nice.
Because, and it's just, it gets me every time. It's a good comeback story.
Yeah, well, and the guy in there was an Irish mentor, so I really like Richard Harris in that movie. That's good. And then last but not least, what does a good life mean to Brian Preston?
I mean, it's owning my time. I mean, that's the thing. I've gotten, as I told you, I'm in my 50s now. I'm super sentimental about every moment I spend in this life. Because, I lost my father at 55. I lost my grandfather when I never even met my grandfather because he died at 50. And so time is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
So I make sure I maximize every moment that I have. And that's my primary focus is, can I own my time and do it with purpose?
Well, that's a lot of wisdom, sir, and we are blessed to have had you on today. The book is The Millionaire Mission. The man is Brian Preston, and the message is, no matter who you are, what place in life you were born into, or what the market conditions or inflation rates are, or whatever the future holds, you have a lot of say-so in where you end up. And if you have a system that you follow, you can end up there. Brian, we thank you for your work. Appreciate the Money Guys show. Appreciate all the resources you offered people today. And appreciate your mission. It's really helping a lot of people. So thank you for being part of our program today.
Oh, Brian, this has been a blast. And I can tell, I can see your heart just from the way we've talked about all these things. And that's the biggest thing. We talk about we call it the abundance cycle. You just give it away, let people load up and find the success, and then let's go create opportunities for all of us to work with each other at some point.
You bet. Well, the first person who taught me about money was my mom, Therese Buffini. She's going to finish us up today, Brian, with a little Irish blessing all the way from Dublin. Today is her 94th birthday. And happy birthday to you, Mom. Love you. Take care of yourself. And thanks for blessing us all.
May the road rise up to meet you, and may the wind always be at your back. May the rain fall soft upon your fields, and the sun shine warm upon your face. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand. See you next time.